Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey, welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast from California. I'm Sean, and from Pennsylvania, that is Kyle.
That's me. What's up?
How's it going, man? Thanks for hanging out with me tonight on the phone. Today.
Big time.
Hey, we've got another great interview today. This one will feature James Miller from James Miller Lifeology. James is a licensed psychotherapist and a composer, and he's got a wildly successful podcast and YouTube channel. And overall, he's just an incredible, good human being who spends his life helping other people live and be the best version of themselves possible.
Yeah.
We got introduced to James through Kyle, actually. Kyle, you're on people's radar right now. Why is that?
He interviewed me about my book, so that was super cool. And his show, it's on radio and podcasts and everything, and it apparently reaches 3 million people. So
what an incredible reach. And hopefully, maybe some of those people go out and buy your book.
We'll see. Maybe a couple.
Speaking of, Kyle's new book is called Shifting into High Gear, and you can visit, any bookstore. We'll have it, or Amazon, so whatever you want to do. Anyway, James invited Kyle on. I listened to the interview. Kyle, and I'm sure you have too. What an incredibly pleasant guy and warm and just an insightful interview.
Yep.
And I realized that that's kind of his approach, was just to kind of gather inspiring and insightful and otherwise motivating people. So I was excited to bring him on to our show.
Yep. He's awesome, and he walks the walk, it seems like, too, you know, and that's why he's so compelling as a person to talk to about this stuff.
And I think besides having just an amazing attitude about life, one of the things I really appreciated about James in the midst of our conversation was how his advice, which he gives some good advice, so don't tune out. His advice and his tips, although maybe basic, they're very jaw-dropping. Oh my gosh, you're right. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's a simple idea, but holy cow, I better do that.
Yeah, obviously he's got a level of experience and education that I don't, and so I really enjoyed his tips and advice.
Yeah.
But before we play his interview, we actually wanted to share with you one of our ongoing themes or kind of stories throughout the episodes or podcasts are things revolving around our Don't Forget the Crew movement. So we've got a Don't Forget the Crew story. Today, this story actually comes from one of our listeners and a dear friend of both of ours, Mary. She lives somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere cold.
Vermont,
thank you.
Dude, they make maple syrup in their backyard. It's freaking crazy.
Yeah, I remember this.
Oh yeah, we talked about this before.
Yeah, anyway. And I don't know about you, but I actually got a jar of that maples. Oh, okay, you did too?
I've tasted it. Dude, yeah.
I thought it was special. Anyway, going back to Mary's story, she's she got involved in movement right away, started giving chocolate every flight, every hotel, whatever comes her way. So she was flying to a clinical trial appointment, gets on the plane, gives away some chocolate. The plane lands at the end, and she is given her wheelchair and is broken. And what's really cool about Mary's story is the ground crew helps her father maneuver and MacGyver the wheelchair at least to functionality.
Yeah,
so they can leave the airport.
I think it was super busted when it got off the airplane, a non-functional.
Yeah, she had to take it to a shop. It needed a professional mechanic or welder to fix something. Anyway, She goes on to her appointment. The day ends. The next day comes. She gets on another plane to go home, same airline, and she still gave more chocolate and more candy and said, "Thank you for your service. I appreciate what you guys do." So I love that and appreciate that, because I know for me personally, I would find that challenging. Y'all broke my wheelchair yesterday. Yeah. I don't know that you deserve candy today.
Right. But
to be fair, okay.
Well, it's really the heart of the don't forget the crew thing, right? It's like no matter what.
Totally. Yep.
Make the decision now before you ever get on a plane or interact with your taxi driver or whatever.
Exactly.
To show your appreciation and your gratitude.
And I think it's a reality check or a realization that, hey, yeah, even though that airline may have busted up my wheelchair yesterday, the people that serve me today had nothing to do with it.
Right.
So why would I hold it against them? So, Mary, thank you for joining us in spreading the love and the kindness. For those listeners who aren't familiar, you can get more information by visiting don'tforgetthecrew.com.
Yeah.
All right,
baby.
Kyle, what do you say we just get into our interview and let the folks hear an amazing guy talk about some basic but really powerful advice in walking through life.
Let's do it.
All right, here is our interview with James Miller from James Miller Lifeology.
James Miller is a licensed psychotherapist and the executive producer and host of the nationally broadcasted and syndicated show James Miller Lifeology. James has been in the mental health field for over 22 years. After 13 years in private practice, James left his successful practice in Washington, D.C. area to follow his dreams. He created James Miller Lifeology, where he globally helps people simplify and transform their spirit, mind, and body. James Miller, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a guest in your show today. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, and we have to recognize that Sean is on the phone today. He has to go to work, so he is in a remote location, undisclosed remote location, on his phone. So
private. Nobody can know.
All right, good deal. Well, James,
so basically, what Kyle is confessing is he'll sound better for once than me. No, I'm just playing.
All right, nice. Well, James, we want you to tell us about James Miller Lifeology. I just interviewed on your radio show not too long ago, and I really appreciate that. I had a really good time talking with you about different topics, and I just wanted our listeners to get an idea of what James Miller Lifeology is all about.
Excellent. Well, first off, you did a fantastic job on my show, so thank you for an amazing interview. And also, congratulations on your new book. I'm so excited for this. I can't wait to hear about all the things that are happening in your life today. So James Miller Lifeology, Lifeology is actually a literary term. In other words, it was created for literature, which basically states that everybody has a lesson to learn or a lesson to teach, that we're not different than anybody else. And so I created a platform where I really help people either give their story or tell their story, or have an expert like yourself come on my show and talk about the different things they've learned and how they've really helped empower people. So I really like to normalize that we're all the same. We experience the same type of emotions. The situation may be different in how it's expressed, but we all are unified in the emotions that we experience. And I help people really recognize what do you do with that emotion to live a really healthy, balanced life.
Nice. So I understand that you do like one-on-one consulting too, or like therapy, or what? How does that work? What is that?
Great question. So I was in the I had a private practice for years.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed it. So I do still see some patients now and again, but I also offer consultation for my listeners and people who want to work with me. It's not psychotherapy. It's more like life skills, life mentoring, those types of things to help people go from, I guess, point A to point Z very quickly, to really learn how to, I guess, really delve into the self-development mode in a very quick way to really help them accomplish all their goals in a very significant, in a very, I guess, quick, significant amount of time.
Nice.
What would you say was a turning point for you in terms of wanting to spend your life helping other people in this arena?
Great question. So when I was 18 years old, in fact, I did a show on this last year. I was a guest on someone's show, and I was really transparent about this because usually, I'm sure you guys know this as well, when you're a public figure and media person, sometimes we like to present a certain way. But I was really transparent in the show that I was on, and I talked about when I was 18 years old, I was really struggling with depression, and it was really difficult for me. And so I was in a hospital for a couple of weeks, and in that moment, I made a vow that I would not let anybody else my age, or anyone really, struggle with what I was struggling with at that time. So in that moment, I made that vow. And what's really cool, you two, is 4 years later, after I received my bachelor's degree in psychology, I ended up working in that same hospital, on the same unit, in that same room. And this time I had the keys to the I was, an employee there. So it was a really powerful lesson for me. I didn't even realize where I was until I was actually in that room. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? So the vow I made when I was 18 years old came true. And then from there, that was the platform of what I do and how I help people, from either psychotherapy, which I still do a little bit, to the rest of the more self-development, self-help mode. And so that's just kind of how I've developed.
The cool thing that I was thinking about that is that, you were probably the one that made that happen, right? It wasn't you asking, it wasn't anyone else doing it. It was like, all right, you did it. I'm sure there were other people involved. You got yourself out of that place, and now you're in the position to help others, and I think that's amazing.
Oh, thank you. The way I look at it is this, so I believe in a higher power, and my higher power specifically for me is God. So anyone can have their own version of that. But the way I look at that is this: we as people and individuals, we do all the hard work, and those opportunities to move to the next level are by God or by the universe or whatever else. And so it's so unfortunate when people have so many opportunities, but for whatever reason, we don't put action behind it. We don't put work behind it to prepare ourselves for when that door opens to walk through it. I've been very blessed with James Miller Lifeology is every opportunity I've had, I've actually not sought it. I've done all the hard work behind the scenes, and every opportunity, from writing for magazines to radio to TV, books, all these things have come to me. And I do not say that with any arrogance. I say that with humility. But my point is that each one of us have an opportunity to put actions behind our dreams. What is it? A dream without action is simply a wish. And so the whole concept of we all want to do something in life, but how much work do you put into it? Right. Success is like a bank account. If you can only withdraw what you put into it. So I always do my best to be to put as much hard work as possible into something. And then when it's time for me to have another opportunity, that opportunity always presents itself. And so I'm always looking for that opportunity. I'm like, okay, what's happening today? What's next? And it's just a fun journey.
Nice. You know what?
I was listening to a.
Oh yeah, please go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, listening to a John Maxwell podcast on my drive this morning, and he quoted Henry Ford, and I don't know the exact words, but something to the effect of Henry Ford saying, "The biggest failure in life is the lack of preparation."
Yes.
In terms of not being ready for success. And again, I'm paraphrasing. These aren't the exact words. I'm sure Henry Ford said it in a much cooler way. But the idea was, like you said, you've got to show up and do the work so that when the opportunity presents itself, you're ready to jump and ride,
Yes.
or get in and get the job done.
I've seen some.
I appreciate you saying that.
Oh, thank you. I've seen some quotes on Instagram and just these other social media where people are like, "Today I'm going to get $100," or "Today I'm going to get a new job." But I'm always thinking, but did you apply for that job? Or did you do something to make that happen? So yes, those opportunities are there, but if we don't put the action behind it, and once again, it's just simply a wish. There's no substance behind it.
Yep, I agree.
I often think of the lottery. I mean, how many of us dream of winning the jackpot, but we never buy a ticket? Like, we're never going to win if you don't play.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is very true.
All right, James. Well, I want to focus a little bit on your experience with people with disabilities, working in the psychotherapy field, and in different places. And so, tell us about your background and about your, maybe a couple experiences in different arenas working with people with disabilities.
Now, when we say disabilities, do we want to quantify that or measure that with mental health disabilities as well, or just simply physical disabilities?
Physical disabilities obviously relate to Sean and I, but I don't want to put a roof on it. Let's talk about everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So keep going. I was going to make a joke and it was inappropriate. It doesn't matter.
We're being serious here now, Sean. Come on. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
I'm totally kidding. So, all right. So my history, I've worked in many different types of places. In fact, when I first graduated from graduate school, I worked in a prison. And so I'm like, 24, 25 years old. What in the world did I know about life working in a prison? Totally out of my element. But like I said, in everything you can think of, I've been a professor at universities. I've been clinical supervisors for different, for state of Virginia, for Washington, D.C. So I've done a lot of things. And in that, you'll often find that people who go through certain situations, and anybody, it doesn't really matter if they have a disability or not, many people define themselves based off of the events they've experienced. If you're bankrupt, you're all of a sudden this bankrupt person. Or if you go through, if you have a health scare, you're all of a sudden a person who has this particular disease. When people use a life-altering change or a situation that's happened, when they define themselves with that, all of a sudden they've put limitations on themselves. There's an evolution in our life of where we were versus where we are. When we compare what was versus what is today, it's often very different. So if someone's experienced a loss, or someone has experienced a change in their life, if that's a physical disability or a mental disability or just a life change, we will often compare what was versus what is. My life before was amazing, wonderful, perfect. My life today is horrible. I can't do anything. I have no hope. And when we don't separate between the current life versus the previous life, then all of a sudden we continually look backwards and we continue to look at what we cannot do. And so when I work with people from all different types of walks, from mental health to physical disabilities to just pretty much anyone who's experienced a life change, we have to not separate we have to make sure we separate those two things, because what was versus what is completely different. So we can't look at good and bad. The past was good, the present is bad. So I help people separate between those two things, because the past was and the present is. And so we can't compare the two, because the one before will, in our mind, always be better, and we will never experience joy again or opportunities again in our future. So that's really what I find for many people who experience a physical disability that they all of a sudden or suddenly have just experienced. Where they had mobility before, and all of a sudden they don't, and they don't have that now. And that is one of the things I really help people separate, is between those two things.
Nice. So
that's pretty powerful, even just right now, thinking about it in my own life or in our lives. You've got the power in understanding that the change doesn't make you a bad person or make you a failure. It's just a different set of circumstances, and you can still define who you are and what you're going to do in spite of those circumstances.
In my field,
I appreciate hearing that for sure.
In my field, we have what's called radical acceptance. It's a fancy term that basically says you accept the facts as they are. Doesn't mean you like it. Right. Doesn't mean you agree with it. Doesn't mean to let somebody off the hook. It just simply states, these are the facts in front of me. After an appropriate time of grieving, what do I do with these facts? And so when we realize, okay, I'm going to remove the emotion, because once again, that's the grieving time. Once you get past that, now we say, all right, this is my life now. I can't compare it to how it was. I have to look at it now. What do I do with these facts? And so we now have to look at what we can do versus what we cannot do. And so when we come from a place of empowerment, that creates action, that creates movement, that creates progress and self-development, as opposed to getting stuck in what we cannot do. What we cannot do is literally, there's no physical movement that's involved in that. So there's no emotional movement. So that's how people become stagnant, is because they don't focus on what they can do. They focus on what they cannot do.
Right. So, James, when someone's like first injured or maybe first diagnosed with a condition, they're often, probably all the time, in this place where they're not interested in facing up to their situation.
Correct.
In their grieving, they're not interested at the moment in moving forward. Mm-hmm. So, but Sean and I both know, and I think everyone knows, or everyone, anyway, Sean and I both know that, our community is the most amazing thing, and connecting with the community really helps us build our confidence to move forward. And so when you have that person who's recently diagnosed or recently injured, where do you start to reach out to them, to bring them in and help them see how the community can help them?
Often people don't see themselves as perhaps what their peers are, what their peers have experienced. So there's still a period of denial of this aspect of, I'm not like these other people in this community. This is going to change, because if you've never been in a community like that before, the concept of joining people that you visually see that maybe have the same disability, it's hard to connect your own self with individuals who are just like you. And so that's the element of, okay, once again, I have to come to terms with this is my new life, not a bad life or a horrible life. This is my new life. And in the new life, we can't compare those two things. So it comes back to, when I work with someone, or I really help people look at this, or just even people who are going to enter into community, is what has changed and what has not changed. So it is good to look at those things. So some of the things are, what has not changed is I still can laugh. I still have a great sense of humor. I still have my intelligence. I still have my eyesight, or whatever it may be. So when you start to look at what you do have, and once again, this comes from a place of positive psychology, it starts to see that, wait, I still have a lot of these personality traits. I still have whatever it may be. And when you can start to name off those things, it helps you realize that you may have one thing or a few things that are different, but there's still all these other things that are part of your life, part of your personality, part of who you are. So I always help people from an individual standpoint look at that. And then as they're able to look at that, then they look at their community. Well, that person laughs like me. That person has a sense of humor like me. That person is this, or that person is that. And then that's how people start to say, well, maybe I'm not so different than these people. Yep. But when we come from a place of, I am not like these people in that community, it's because there still is a form of denial of what's happened. Perhaps if it was a physical trauma that happened where they perhaps lost a leg. I'm making this up here, but a physical trauma that happened where they are substantially different now. So we have to look at what is still the same, and then connect that with the people that are in the community.
Nice. Sean, I think of a quote from our friend Sam Bridgman, and gosh, it gives me chills just thinking about it, but he says, my legs might not work like they used to, but my smile still works, my laugh still works, and most importantly, the things that I feel in my heart still work. And I think when we start from, like you're saying, James, when we start from that place, then we definitely find common ground with everyone around us.
Yes.
When we're looking past our physical and into the things that we think and feel, then we can definitely find common ground with anyone.
Yes, we can. And that's the thing with Lifeology. That's going back to you asked earlier what I do. That's the common ground. Is Lifeology essentially states we all feel the same thing. It's just how do we present it? How do we help each other through that? So the circumstances may be different, but the emotions of what we feel is all the same.
Yep, I like it. So this is like my personal counseling session with James right now.
All right, I'm ready.
Sean, are you still there? Do you have something to add to that last?
Well, I was just wondering, because I'm with you. I do feel like this is a personal counseling session. So, James, are you going to invoice us for this interview?
I'm pulling up my billing system right now, guys. So let's go for it. I'm ready.
Nice. All right, so my question or thing I want to throw out is that oftentimes I think we want to appear to be okay because we want like our friends and family to realize that we're not a burden. They can continue on with their lives. They don't need to change their lives because of us. We don't want to be a burden on the people around us. But I feel like also that limits the depth of relationships that we can have because we limit what people can see in about us and into our lives. And so how do we find a balance between those two extremes?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing I would ask is, how do you define that you're okay? Because if we don't really understand that word, because the concept of being okay, I may have a different version of that. You may have a different version. So if the people in your support group don't know what that means, then their version of okay is going to be different than yours. I always help people just really have a basic concept of my version of I am okay is this. What is your version? So when people can enter in and be on common ground, then they can look at you and say, oh, according to Kyle, he's okay. I don't have to worry. And vice versa, you can understand, according to them, this is how I would demonstrate I'm okay. Now it makes sense. Okay, so if I do this or don't do that, if I see they act a little bit different, it's because their version of okay is a little bit different than mine. So a simple statement of this is how I know that I'm doing okay. And you can have descriptive words. You can say I laugh a lot, or I tell jokes, or I read books. I clean my house every day. However you want to describe yourself when you're doing well, that's how people know. And they don't have to ask you, are you okay? They'll see that by your actions and by your personality that you demonstrate that you are okay. So when you can even give descriptive words or little bullet points of this is when things are going really well in my life, this is how I am. And then you can even say when things are not going well, this is what it looks like. So you can give a continuum of what that looks like from snapshots of maybe actions you do or personality traits you demonstrate to when things aren't going well, and the same thing. And so people then say, okay, well, I don't even have to ask because I know he's doing well. And so that's something that whether you have a physical disability, a mental health disability, or just anybody in general, because once again, we're not different. It's just that's how people know when we're doing well. So when that dialogue or conversation happens, people can all be on board and they don't have to worry about, okay, Kyle's crying right now. Oh my gosh, is he okay? Well, he's demonstrated he's okay in all these other things that he's told me. So this is the evolution of him showing me more, because I know after this conversation, he's going to continue to do what he's said he needs to do in order to be okay.
Nice. I like it. All right, Sean. So, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Like, I feel like a lot of times I keep my family sort of at arm's length, unfortunately, because I don't want them to limit their lives and because they have to cater to my needs. And I have an amazing relationship with my family, and I love them so much, and I know they love me so much, but I feel like sometimes that can get in the way. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's, maybe it's just concern for everybody else. I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, no, there's a whole lot in there. I mean, I definitely get it. I think it's our own personal, I'm not a professional, but if my mentality is people view me this way and they're going to view me as a burden, then of course I'm like you. I'm going to keep certain things tucked away. Some things I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to maybe pretend everything is okay. But if you want your relationships to be deep and significant, I think you've got to get to a point where you're comfortable, at least with a handful of people, talking about life as it is, the reality of it, not just the good or just the bad, but the reality of what life is today. So I don't know that I'm actually speaking to your point, Kyle, but I get it. We want to shield friends and family from what we perceive to be burdensome, and in all reality, it's probably not a burden. We're making conclusions or assumptions of their perspective of us, and I'm willing to bet that comes from a place of an unhealthy mentality.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and, I appreciate that James gave us, a first step of, all right, you've got to have this conversation. That might help the situation, right?
Well, if I can piggyback off of what you two said as well, is if nobody's ever said that you're a burden, if no one's ever presented that way, then unfortunately we are putting them in a position to say, I'm a burden to you. But if no one's ever said that, why are we thinking that we're a burden? Because that's a conversation that needs to happen, because unfortunately we're doing them a disservice by saying, I'm not going to open up to you because I think that you think I'm a burden, even though you've never said that. And so unfortunately we limit ourselves on our side because we haven't had this conversation.
Right. Yeah, no, that's something I've been thinking about lately, is like maybe not specifically with the burden thing, but let's just use that as an example. Like maybe sometimes I feel like I'm a burden because that's how I see myself. That's not even how other people see me, maybe. But it's me interjecting my own feelings into the thoughts I have about what other people are thinking about me. But that's not even true,
In my field, we have what's called a cognitive distortion, or the layman's term is a thinking error. What that basically means is this: whatever we perceive to be true. So we look at a situation and we gather all of our thoughts, and then those thoughts, that perception, determines what we feel. What we feel then determines what we do. And so if you've collected this information when you're perhaps talking to one person and the collection of thoughts says, I'm a burden, that thought of I'm a burden translates to your emotions of, I got to be really careful. I'm really nervous about this. I'm really anxious. I'm feeling closed off. And then all of a sudden your body responds that way. Perhaps you don't say what you want to say, or perhaps you're a little more short with them. But that never even happened. But our perception tells us that's what's happened. And so a thinking error is essentially when we do things that causes us to respond in a way that's disproportionate to the situation, or causes us to shut down, or causes us not to be healthy, either internally or to have a conflict with someone else. Unfortunately, that is what is called a thinking error. So the way to do that, to get rid of that thinking error, is to basically say, what's the proof that I have that people think I am a burden? Okay, well, if there's no proof, then maybe that's not necessarily true. So let me remove that thinking error and have a conversation with someone without that thought of I am a burden, what would be different? What would my emotions be? Yeah, they may still be a little nervous and anxious because it's the first few times you've talked to people, but perhaps your body would respond a little bit different. Perhaps you would show a little bit more emotion. Perhaps your body would allow you to interact with them in a little bit different way. So the question is always this: if there is no data or facts in that moment which proves your thoughts are true, then maybe they're not 100% true. Yeah. And the only way to figure that out is to look at past interactions with them, ask them questions, because you won't know unless you ask.
Right. Wow. Awesome. I love that.
That's pretty powerful.
And I think, this kind of thinking can be applied to any situation, right? Just objective thinking, like look at the facts, not at how you feel. Obviously that plays into a certain extent, but most of the time it seems like the actual facts of the situation are more important than how you feel.
Yes. Did you know the word belief in the English language, the antonym, in other words, the opposite word of belief is actually truth? It's pretty powerful. So if I believe that you don't like me, or if I believe that this situation is a certain way, unfortunately, according to the English language, I am wrong, or that is a falsehood, because I don't have enough information. The more information we have about any situation, the more successful we're going to be in overcoming that situation. So once again, it goes back to, if I have a thought, it doesn't mean that thought's true. It just simply means that's my belief. So in order to change that, I have to gather more information. More information can be from my past, the past interactions I've had with this person, or more information could be I could simply ask them. So when we have a belief, just know, according to the English language, that that belief is actually false.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. I love it, and it's something we can apply to any situation. Sean, do you have anything else that comes to mind? We're at about 30 minutes, but we could entertain one more thought if you want.
Sure. I don't have anything specific, but I am slightly mind blown by the power that has been packed in to the last 30 minutes. So I'm really grateful, James. And I do want to know, either for myself or other listeners, where and how do people get in touch with you? How do they, I know you've got a podcast and YouTube channel and all kinds of good stuff available for listeners. So where do we find more on you?
That is a great question. First off, thank you both so much for allowing me to be a guest on your show today. I'm truly honored. If your listeners would like to find out more information about me, they can simply go to jamesmillerlifeology.com or at lifeology.tv, and they can listen. I'm on pretty much every podcasting platform, digital platforms, terrestrial radio stations, anything you can think of. You can all find it on both of my sites there, and you can follow me there as well.
Awesome. Well, and you know what? In the show notes for this episode, we're going to put the link to my episode from your radio show. Yes. And if people want to check that out, they can as well. So, James, perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again, I hope, sometime.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you once again.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and please subscribe on the iTunes. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins.
Until next time, keep living with urgency.